Write it on your heart that every day. Write it on your heart that every day is the best day of the year. The best day of the year.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you, Billy. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's a treat to have all of you here, and thank you for coming back and joining in this wonderful celebration on our downtown Unity Circles on Sundays. It's to me, it's a treat just to be able to be here in your presence. I want you to know, and sometimes I get chilled just thinking about all of the wonderful energy that I get here every Sunday. It definitely is one of the highlights of my week. I hope it is for you as well. And we're working on, and we're learning, and we're growing, we're exploring about prosperity and abundance, and we're using a work that is just a classic work by Eric Butterworth, who is one of Unity's most profound teachers, in my opinion, and certainly had an amazing impact, not only on my life, but he's had an amazing impact on a lot of people's lives. He's had an impact on the world through his impact on other people. And actually, I'll share more about that as we go on in our service. But this one's called Spiritual Economics, the Principles and Process of True Prosperity. And last week, we explored and talked about two of the first things that we will want to tap into and practice with and grow from and learn and grow in order to really begin to develop what Charles Fillmore and Eric Butterworth calls a prosperity consciousness. And really a prosperity consciousness is a real consciousness of spiritual well-being. And in order to really begin to do that, one of the things that we explored is to begin to recognize and understand that we are right now in the presence and of the presence of what Charles Fillmore calls divine substance. There is this amazing substance out of which all things in life are created and formed. It's been called a lot of different things. I was listening to a wonderful talk this last week by Brian Swimmy. Some of you may be familiar with Brian Swimmy, who wrote a wonderful book called The Journey of the Universe, and some years ago had an amazing series on PBS called Canticle to the Cosmos. And he is talking about how all of the universe is formed and shaped of the same thing. We call it energy nowadays, and he had an expression that really spoke to me. He called it awakened energy. Was that what, Julie? It was aware energy, wasn't it? Aware energy. And I translated it obviously into awakened energy, which is actually another good phrase. It's awakened energy. It's energy that is conscious, and it is conscious of itself. And ultimately, all things in life are actually being shaped and formed through this aware energy. And so everything that you experience in your life, your physical being, the chair you're sitting on, everything is really a part of this creative process in life, and all of it's being shaped and formed through this divine substance, through this aware energy. And so that's one of the things that we want to practice an understanding of, immersing ourselves not only in an awareness of being in and in this divine energy, but also that is at the very heart of our being. It is the essence of who and what we are, that we are basically awakened, aware energy. And that's part of what really is shaping and forming all of the experiences in our lives, and we are participating in that on a consistent basis. We are continually participating in the creative process. I'll say more about that as we go along, but it's really valuable for us to get that understanding that we live and move and have our being, as Jesus talked about, in this divine milieu of this creative, awakened, aware energy. And then the second thing that we talked about, that Eric really points out is a really important and significant and valuable step for us to develop an awareness of and a prosperity consciousness. and to be able to experience what he calls the affluence in life. We understood and we talked about last week how the word affluence really means to be in the flow. It's actually being in the flow of that creative energy. And that creative energy is always manifesting in some form, in some way. And part of our expanding and growing in our awareness and consciousness is to align ourselves and to be in that flow. And one of the most important and valuable things that we can begin to get an awareness about is that the only way that we can truly be in that flow is, well, let me see how I can say this. The title of the chapter really is Your Fortune Begins With You. And the only way that we can really begin to get in the flow of consciousness is to recognize that the only thing that we can really truly participate in and be a part of is what we ourselves choose to say yes to. In other words, God, as Eric says, can do no more for us than God can do through us. That we are participants in the creative process, and the more we can awaken to that knowing and that awareness and accept that we are a part of that creative process and that we are in the very essence of our being flowing in some form, in some way, and that we are, that there really is only one source, and that source is working in and through the essence of our being. And one of the things that he refers to and talks about and really points us to is this understanding and helping us to shift our awareness from looking for other people, circumstances, situations, shifting our awareness from looking at those as our source and beginning to recognize that one true source, which is the divine, and that source works through the energy of our own being, through the energy of our own consciousness, through the energy of our own heart and mind. Now, that's not to say that there aren't ways that the universe we can open our awareness to wonderful possibilities and channels for amazing, wonderful things, but not any of those channels of good are our source. And the moment that we begin to think that the channel for our good is our source, we are actually subverting the creative process, and we are actually blocking our flow. And so a really significant energy and consciousness and awareness for us to have is to begin to really recognize that prosperity process is from the within to the without, and not necessarily, and really not the other way around. You can eliminate the word necessarily. It's not the other way around. That our prosperity doesn't come from the channels and the circumstances, the situations out here in our world. They come through our own energy and consciousness and our own creative power and energy. Does that make sense? And so, I'm exploring these with you, and I'm learning these things even more myself. There's always another level, another depth of understanding as we go through. And so as I'm doing and learning and exploring these things, I'm always looking for different things to share about abundance and prosperity in life. And as I shared last week, what I've discovered is there's not a whole lot of funny stories and jokes about abundance, and I'm not sure exactly why that is, other than it's when it's truth, it really is not that funny, but when it's really an error, it becomes pretty funny, because most of the jokes I found are really about lack. And I think unless, even the thing that we can learn about lack is that it's not very funny when you're in the middle of it, right? But when you're actually past it, it's actually pretty comical. Isn't that true? Yes. And really there is an illusion that we buy into that when we look back on it, it's actually pretty funny. But when we're in the middle of it, it doesn't seem all that funny, does it? And part of our learning and waking up is to begin to recognize that if it's going to be funny a week from now, it's probably funny now. If we can begin to get into that energy and that awareness, if we can look at ourselves once we've gotten past the experience of lack and look back on it, you can bet we're going to laugh, so why don't we just start laughing now? Right? So I come across some wonderful stories. I love telling these stories. And here's one about Joey. Joey was only 5 years old, but he was really a very sharp 5-year-old, And the neighbors would love to play this wonderful game with him, and they just thought he was so cute and so adorable and so fun. And they would give him a choice. They would put out in one hand a nickel and in one hand a dime, and ask him which one he would choose. And he says, I want the bigger one. So he'd take the nickel. And they would just laugh. They thought that was so funny. And then Joey's older brother came to him and said, don't you know that a dime is twice as good as a nickel? He said, well, of course I know. Do you think I'm going to blow a good thing, though? I love that one. Oh, boy. It was a father took his young daughter who has been visiting his office, and they took to an elegant restaurant for lunch. And she ordered a hamburger. Typical, right? And he says, well, you know, why don't you order something different or unusual? And she said, well, Dad, I've never had a $12 hamburger. Oh, and then there was another I heard. When I heard the sound of ice cream wagons and bells, I saw the front door open and wide open. I suspected that my 2.5-year-old had run outside and was chasing the ice cream wagon. And as I caught up with him, I saw that he was clutching something in his hands, and it was my credit card. Oh, I think it's always good to kind of look at these things in our lives, and we can learn a lot through humor, but I think we learn a lot in other ways as well. Today I want to talk to you about a couple of things that Eric teaches us that are really some of the most significant aspects of learning and developing a prosperity consciousness. In order to kind of give a little demonstration of that, I want to try and show you a little video here. I think I've got everything set up pretty much like we want it.
Who would have thought in all of the years of the Oprah Show that Jim Carrey would be one of our greatest teachers? Okay. Obviously you knew somewhere inside yourself that you were destined to be famous, because I think it's really a marvelous thing, that visualization thing you did. Do you all read about this or hear this? That you used to go up on Mulholland Drive and park
every night
and visualize seeing yourself as...
Yeah, I would visualize,
This is when you were broke and poor.
You know, right, having directors interested in me and people that I respected saying, you know, I like your work or whatever that is. And I would visualize things coming to me that I wanted or whatever.
This was in like 1987, 85?
Yeah. And I had nothing at that time, so it was like, but it just made me feel better. It made me, at that time, all it really was for me was kind of making me feel better. I would drive home and think, well, I do have these things, and they're out there. I just don't have a hold of them yet, but they're out there.
Okay, so you would get this from what, self-help books or whatever?
Yeah, self-help section.
Self-help section.
They've renamed it the Jim Carrey wing.
So didn't you write yourself a check? I heard that you did. Is that true?
I wrote myself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered, and I gave myself 5 years, or 3 years maybe, and I dated it Thanksgiving 1995. And I put it in my wallet, and I kept it there, and it deteriorated and stuff. But then, just before Thanksgiving 1995, I found out that I was going to make $10 million on, I think it was Dumb and Dumber, maybe.
Dumb and Dumber, yeah. So you visualize yourself like... Visualization works if you work hard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing. You can't just visualize and then, you know, go eat a sandwich.
I love that. That was such a powerful moment for me, because I was not a person who did visualization or thought about my belief system in such a practical way. But I learned a lot from Jim Carrey on that show, and he is absolutely correct. If you can see it and believe it, it is a lot easier to achieve it. So thank you, Jim, for reminding us of that lesson. And it doesn't mean that for every person that writes the $10 million check that that's going to happen for you, because so many times people who do that process. Live in the space of wanting and resisting it instead of writing it, visualizing it, seeing it for yourself, and then letting it go. Letting it go, but moving in the direction of working toward it. So nothing happens at first. It's over the process of the time and the effort and the energy that you put into a thing that the energy comes out.
One of the primary things we want to talk about is the power of visualization. And Eric has an amazing and wonderful chapter in here, and he says that one of the most important aspects of the study of truth is training the eyes to see, and to see properly. And that's one of the most important and valuable lessons for us to learn when we really look at the study of abundance and prosperity, is that really abundance and prosperity is dependent upon how and we are looking at, and in a very real way, the lens that we are looking through. Eric says that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And what he's meaning by that is that we have within us our own filters about how we see and look at the world. And what he encourages us to do is to notice and pay attention to what we are focusing our imagination on. See, the imagination is an amazing and powerful gift. It is an amazing and powerful spiritual quality that all of us have. And the reality is we are imagining and we are visualizing something all the time. It never stops. Are you aware of that? So it's not a matter of whether we're going to imagine or visualize something. We are doing it consistently all the time. It is part of how our mind works. And so it's not a question of whether we're going to visualize something. It's a question of, as our daily word said today, what path are we going to choose? It's a question of where are we going to direct the energy of our imagination? Are we going to direct it? And one of the examples that he gives I think is really wonderful. We can really understand the real practice of imagining and visualizing. Primarily, one of the best ways for us to understand it is through the experience and the habit of worry. It's very easy for us to get caught up in worrying about things, and worry is that misuse of our faculty of imagination. We're focusing our imagination in a direction toward what we really don't want. And so part of our waking up is to really begin to notice and pay attention to what it is that we are imagining. We've been working in our Tuesday night class on complaint-free relationships, and one of the key ideas that was presented this last week is an understanding that in all of our relationships, we're basically relating to the narrative that we have about those in our lives. What we're mostly relating to is the story we're saying about others, more than we are really relating to the other themselves. And part of our exploration, part of our waking up is to begin to recognize our stories. Begin to recognize the narratives, begin to recognize the words that we're saying and the images that we're holding about others. And so if we want to shift our relationships, we kind of missed the first part of this, but she was talking about when we are in a relationship that is not working for us, that's part of everything is about a learning experience, and that's part of our lesson is to learn how to be in a better relationship. And that's part of what that experience is calling us to do. And so part of our shift is to begin to focus our imagination on what is possible for us. The other thing that Eric Butterworth really gets into that I think is really valuable is how many, I know we've got some wonderful visualizers in this group, and if you wouldn't mind sharing just by raising your hand, how many of you felt like you've been able to visualize something in your life, a material thing, and then brought that into your experience? Anybody in this group? There's been a few, right? Yeah. I'm going to suggest to you that every one of you has, but you may not be aware of it. I had a couple of conversations this week, and it's really kind of interesting because those conversations kind of went around the same theme, which is that one of the things that I was sharing and talking with some folks about is that they were experiencing how shall I put it? They were experiencing a lot of not having. And one of the things that's important for us to recognize is that even when we're experiencing a lot of not having, part of what's going on is that we have an energy or a focus on, we can have a real emphasis on and a desire to let go. So that's not a bad thing. There are times when that's important. There are things that we want to let go, right? But if we spend a lot of time and energy in the letting go, we get lots of opportunities to let go, right? And so there has to be not only an opportunity of letting go, but there also has an opportunity of receiving as well. And that's part of being in the flow. So it's important for us to focus and be aware of how we are focusing our energy, and that ultimately we are in the process of creating our experiences, and that we can shift the nature and the quality of those experiences by shifting the nature and the quality of our focus of our imagination. In addition to that, of course, there is the understanding that we are in the process of creating what it is that we truly believe. Let me turn that off. Try it one more time. And off. Yay. Despite the appearances, we don't do that with our imagination. We don't turn them off. They're never off, are they? And we don't ever turn off our visioning. We are continually doing it. Now we can adjust the focus, we can point a different direction, and we can project through in some way differently than what we've been projecting before. But we are still in that process, and the more we can wake up to that understanding, the more we will be able to help ourselves direct our imagination in the way that we choose to go. Now, the other thing is thinking about faith. Faith, as Charles Fillmore says, is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. And Eric kind of breaks it down, and he says that basically, faith is expectancy. You do not receive what you want. You do not receive what you pray for. Not even what you say you have faith in. You will always receive what you actually expect. So I want us to think about that for a moment, because it's really a valuable awareness to recognize that faith, we have a tendency to think about faith as something that we want to try and get more of. You know, how many of you would like to have more faith? Better faith? Well, okay. I'm going to suggest to you, and one of the things that Eric points out is that you have absolutely all the faith that you ever could possibly want. In fact, you have all the faith in the universe right here, right now. You are continually in the experience and the energy of faith. And it's not a question of whether you have faith or not. And the story that Jesus tells about faith, about the mustard seed, it's been understood to mean, well, if you only had just a little bit of faith, that you could do amazing things, which is very true. But the reality is, you have unlimited faith, because faith is a divine spiritual quality that is continually working in your life. It's working right now. You have faith in something, right? It's not a matter of whether you're going to have faith. You have faith. Oftentimes, what we have a tendency to do, and this is where we kind of invert things, we have faith in our problems. We have faith in our difficulties. We have faith in our lack. We have faith in the economy going in the toilet. You follow me? When we have that kind of faith, that's kind of what we tend to draw into our experiences even more of. And what we're saying is, faith is really a pivotal thing. It's like a flashlight, and it's really just depending on where you shine it, is what you draw into your experiences. And so, faith is really a sense of expectancy. What is it that you really truly expect in life? What is it you really truly are focusing your energies and awarenesses on? Now, one of the things that he says about this idea of faith is it's important and valuable for us to understand that ultimately we are in the process of creating through that faculty of faith. And one of the ways that we can begin to shift that is begin to look at and pay attention to notice what it is that is showing up in our life. One of the ways we can really see what we are putting our faith in is by what's really there. You can tell what you had faith in yesterday by what you're experiencing today. Does that make sense? And so part of the process is to begin to notice what you're experiencing and not try to necessarily push away what you're experiencing now, because see, that's already been created. Make sense? It's already done. What you're experiencing now was created by the thought you had 2 seconds ago. Does that make sense? The only way that you can really shift what you will experience in this next second is what you are focusing on and what you're having faith in this moment right now. Make sense? So if you find yourself in a circumstance or situation where you're experiencing something that you're not really wanting to experience more of, the exercise, the practice, is to really notice and pay attention not to what's out there and what's happening, what's showing up in your life. It's valuable information to know what's showing up in your life, but what really shifts what's showing up in your life in this next moment is what you are really focusing your faith in right now. And so simply ask yourself the question, what is it that I want to create more of? What is it I want to be participating in creating? The other thing that Eric I think is, his focus is a lot on expanding our energy and our consciousness. He kind of really talks a lot about sometimes we get caught in a trap of focusing on and manifesting things in the outer world and material things. And there's nothing wrong with that. And he even says, that's certainly fine. We can have fine things in our life. But the essence of developing prosperity is really developing an image, a view, a vision of ourselves. As ourselves as being prosperous, of ourselves as being abundant, ourselves as being valued and worthwhile, ourselves as being the essence of the creative process. And so you come from that energy and that consciousness of your own nature and being. And he says you don't make yourself that way by saying affirmations, but what you do with affirmations is you align yourself with the truth that is already in you, which is already you. And so we do the affirmations not to make ourselves something other than what we are, but to awaken that imprisoned splendor that he talks about. There is within us this amazing, creative, possible being that is in the process of unfolding. And part of our coming into a prosperity consciousness is beginning to envision and see ourselves in that way and having the faith to know that that is the truth of who and what we are and begin to see and create from that space. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't also, if we choose to, and one of the ways that it really is valuable for us to do that at times is to practice manifesting physical things in our life and in our world. Manifesting those things, recognizing that none of those things is the truth of our prosperity. It's a demonstration of that. It is a way of experiencing that. It's a way of experiencing the creative process and how we are participating in that. But it's important for us to recognize that's not really the truth of who and what we are. And as we get more into the understanding of the truth of who and what we are, we'll find that we begin to draw all kinds of amazing experiences in our lives, and there's a real beauty and a value in doing that. And so this week, what I'm going to invite you to do, homework, I always like to give homework. 2 things. I want you to spend some time recognizing and paying attention to what you are imagining, what you are visualizing. Not if you are, but what you are. And then notice and see if you can begin to shift whatever you're imagining into seeing and experiencing yourself as an essence of creative power and being and full of this amazing abundance that we were practicing and that we talked about last week. One of the things that came to me in my meditation about this is that Gandhi said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And I believe he was teaching us a spiritual principle about change and about peace and bringing peace into our experiences. I believe that same principle is true when we're talking about abundance and prosperity. We have a wonderful course that we do here from time to time. We did it last year and we'll do it again, called the 4T Prosperity Program, Stretton Fifth. How many of you have taken that amazing course? It's just life-changing. One of the things they start off in that course is they have you 100 times every day, they have you affirm, I am prosperous. Now, the purpose of that is not necessarily to get you to be prosperous, because reality is you already are. It's to get you to align with the prosperity that you already are. And in my meditation, when I was doing that, one of the things that occurred to me is that prosperity and abundance really is an essence of our being. And so you can even say, not only I am prosperous, but you can even say, I am prosperity. In fact, would you say that with me? I am prosperity. Not only are you immersed in abundance, but it is the essence of your being. And so you can honestly, clearly say from the essence of your being, I am abundance. Can you get in touch with that? Can you feel what that feels like? Let's say that together. I am abundance. How does that feel when you feel that? Notice that. Notice that feeling of feeling abundance. And also notice anything that comes up that doesn't feel like that. Because oftentimes, what doesn't feel like that will come up. And so those are the things where we shift and we pivot our awareness into focusing on that energy and that consciousness of our truth of our being. And the more we can practice that, the more we will find that we will see things more clearly, we will see opportunities that we didn't see before, we'll have divine inspiration, we'll have things that begin to flow in a way that we hadn't seen before. And so I would invite you to have some fun with that this week. Let's play with it. Jim Carrey is a wonderful example of how, you notice he not only manifested $10 million, but he manifested the kind of being and person who would move into that kind of energy. And that's kind of what really it's about. That's what he was saying, is it's really work, and it's work on becoming what it is that we have the potential to be in our lives. So I hope you have some fun with that this week, and you are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine. You are, as Eric says, you are God's living enterprise, and you are destined for abundance and success. That's the truth of your being. In fact, I want you to say, I am God's living enterprise.
I am God's living enterprise.
And I am destined for abundance and success.
And I am destined for abundance and success.
Thank you, God. Let's move into our meditation time.